Welcome back, everyone! Now, if you love history that's just absolutely packed with intense political strategy, rule-breaking characters, and some seriously bizarre legal loopholes, well, you are in exactly the right place. In today's explainer, we're diving deep into the incredibly complex world of Ottoman marriage, because as you'll see, family law back then, it wasn't just about romance. It was a literal tool for survival, a key to absolute power, and eventually, the focal point of a world war.
So, let's start things off with a massive, counterintuitive hook. Imagine you're a spectacularly wealthy, early modern monarch. You'd probably want to marry into another powerful noble family just to secure your legacy, right? Well, not if you were an Ottoman sultan. For centuries, the most powerful monarchs of the Ottoman Empire intentionally refused traditional marriage, relying entirely on concubinage to build their dynasties.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The ultimate power play.
To really understand why a sultan would reject a grand royal wedding, we have to look at the ruthless political logic of the imperial harem. Think about it. Marrying a foreign royal or a local noble meant inviting dangerous political alliances and ambitious in-laws right into the heart of the palace. That's a huge risk. By relying exclusively on enslaved consorts, the sultan ensured the mothers of his children had absolutely zero outside allies. There was no noble family to back them up, meaning their allegiance was totally 100% exclusive to him. It was basically the ultimate tool for maintaining absolute power.
And the evolution of this succession system, it was incredibly bloody. Early on, back in the 14th century, sultans actually did make strategic noble marriages. But fast forward to the 15th century, and it was concubinage only. And here's where it gets really dark. To prevent civil wars, the empire adopted a strict one mother, one son rule. A concubine would have one son, and her sole purpose in life was to raise and protect him. Why? Because by the 16th century, the institutionalized law of fratricide meant whichever prince took the throne would literally execute all his brothers. It was a deadly survival of the fittest battle royale. Eventually, by the 17th century, they transitioned to a seniority system, where the oldest living male in the dynasty inherited the throne, but man, for a long time the stakes of royal reproduction were absolute life and death.
Which brings us to Section 2, the woman who broke the rules.
For decades, this system was rigid, it was terrifying, and it relied on keeping women completely isolated from traditional legal power. But then, one incredible character completely dismantled this established system from the inside out. The number 6 represents her ultimate rebellion. Hurrem Sultan, who actually began her life in the palace as a Ruthenian slave, managed to completely captivate Suleiman the Magnificent. Throwing that sacred one mother, one son rule entirely out the window, she bore him not 1, but 6 children.
Her rise to power was so unprecedented that it absolutely terrified European observers. I mean, listen to this piece of historical gossip from a 16th century imperial ambassador. He wrote that Hurrem was, quote, commonly reputed to retain his affection by love charms and magic arts. The very idea that a formerly enslaved woman could become the legal wife of the greatest Ottoman sultan was so shocking to the Europeans, and honestly to the Ottoman court itself, that they literally thought she had to be a witch. No way, right? But obviously it wasn't magic. It was just brilliant political maneuvering. To solidify her unprecedented status, Suleiman actually went ahead and invented a brand new institutionalized title just for her, Haseki Sultan. This elevated Hurrem far above even the Ottoman princesses by blood. Suleiman essentially made her the second most powerful person in the empire, an absolute equal to the great queens of Europe. Moving right along to Section 3, the Sultanate of Women. You see, Hurrem's incredible rise wasn't just some one-off anomaly. It actually catalyzed an entire 130-year era where women essentially pulled the strings of the Ottoman Empire. The real pinnacle of this era was the role of the Valid Sultan, or Queen Mother. Because later sultans were sometimes minors or, frankly, politically incompetent, women like the famous Qasem Sultan stepped into this role to act as absolute regents. Qasem wielded unparalleled political power. She effectively ruled the empire, influenced foreign policy, managed massive charitable public works, and is even credited with persuading the court to finally end that brutal practice of fratricide we talked about earlier. A real game changer.
All right, let's step out of the palace for Section 4, everyday love and legal loopholes.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is looking at how everyday Ottoman subjects actually navigated marriage away from all that glittering royal drama. Well, it was a landscape of very strict contrasts. Sharia law permitted Muslim men to marry non-Muslim women, but it strictly prohibited Muslim women from marrying non-Muslim men. This was entirely about maintaining the social hierarchy of the time. And to complicate things even further, while the Islamic State allowed these mixed marriages for men, the Christian Orthodox Church strictly forbade them, frequently threatening the Christian wives with outright excommunication. So, you might be wondering, how did people get around these incredibly strict religious boundaries? Enter the Cabin loophole. Islamic marriage is fundamentally a legal contract, which includes a deferred dower, basically a sum of money paid to the wife in the event of a divorce. Well, foreign European merchants traveling through the empire realized they could completely hack this system. They would enter into these perfectly legal Islamic contracts with local Christian women, knowing full well they would just divorce them and pay that deferred dower when it was time to sail back to Europe. They essentially repurposed Sharia law to create lawful temporary marriages.
Taking a look at the academic analysis of this period, it perfectly breaks down how the Persian term Cabin operated in reality. The Islamic judges, the Qadi courts, weren't performing some special temporary ceremony. Not at all. They were just recording standard, legitimate marriage contracts. It was only the intention of the European foreigners that made it temporary. But on paper, through the ingenious loophole of the deferred dower, it was an entirely lawful union in the eyes of the Ottoman state.
And this brilliantly illustrates how wild things got on the ground. If you look closely at 17th century court records from Crete documenting mixed marriages, you'll find that even Christian priests, the exact same people whose church threatened excommunication for these unions, surprisingly showed up in these Islamic Sharia courts to act as legal witnesses for the couples. It turns out, everyday people and even local clergy cared way more about practical social harmony and legal protection than strict religious doctrine.
Okay, jumping forward in time. Section 5, the 1917 Family Law.
So this decentralized, highly flexible, locally driven system, it couldn't last forever. Fast forward to the 20th century, right into the chaotic, high-stakes geopolitics of World War I, where the empire is literally fighting for its survival. To understand this massive shift, we have to grasp the capitulations. Over centuries, the Ottoman Empire had granted extraterritorial legal rights to foreign European powers. By the 20th century, this meant that millions of Ottoman subjects, often non-Muslims protected by foreign powers, could completely bypass Ottoman courts and sovereignty. This fractured system of autonomous religious courts was literally tearing the empire apart from the inside.
In a desperate bid to save the state, the Young Turk government essentially weaponized family law with a groundbreaking 1917 decree. This was huge. It was the first systematic codification of Ottoman family law, forcibly bringing all subjects, Muslims, Christians, and Jews alike, under central state control. It completely stripped religious authorities of their monopoly over marriage, all with the ultimate geopolitical goal of canceling out those foreign capitulations and reclaiming total sovereignty during the Great War.
The shift was just massive. The traditional system, where religious clerics independently interpreted marriage law based on ancient texts, was entirely replaced. Under the radical new 1917 system, the secularizing state codified the law, emphasizing individual liberty, the rights of women to divorce, and populationism, which was basically the state's desperate need to manage its demographics for wartime survival.
But, as is often the case in history, it was a short-lived revolution. The 1917 law faced incredibly fierce conservative pushback from religious scholars who were completely horrified by the state's interference in Sharia. By 1919, the law was revoked. Yet, there's a profound historical irony here. This failed law completely broke the taboo of the state interfering in family matters, setting the exact stage for the new Republic of Turkey to adopt the entirely secular Swiss civil code just a few years later.
From sultans refusing to marry, to everyday merchants exploiting loopholes, all the way to a world war being fought over marriage certificates, the history of Ottoman family law is absolutely wild. But I want to bring it back to our most compelling character. Looking at everything we've learned today about how the system was originally designed to keep women powerless, was Hürrem Sultan a ruthless, power-hungry manipulator? Or was she a brilliant survivor who simply mastered a rigged system? I really want to hear your takes on this. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. Hit that like button if you learned something new today, and I will see you in the next explainer.